My watch says 10:21. It's my opinion that we have a motion to amend in front of us, and it's my intention that we deliberate and take action on that motion to amend. But then my sense is there'll be a lot more discussion that probably will take place about the main motion that we probably will not complete tonight. I was hopeful, though, that we could address this motion to amend before we did a recess. So, Mr. McGettrick, you had intended to have your motion to amend be accepted as a friendly amendment. From just sort of hanging over the shoulders over there, it looks like you probably have some changes to your motion to amend. Is that correct?
Well, we're still friendly, but we have we're modifying. I'm modifying my motion, Mr. Moderator. The Town Council has suggested that we strike out a phrase in what I had to eliminate reference to the town administrator. So if you want, I can read it again with those changes.
Please.
Okay. So the language would read, in my motion to amend, in the appointment of the fire chief, the Board of Selectmen shall continue to comply with Section 42 of Chapter 48 of the general laws. In the appointment of the police chief, the Board of Selectmen shall continue to comply with Chapter 272 of the Acts of 1989. Otherwise, notwithstanding, we go into that notwithstanding language that's already in the warrant. And apparently, if I might, Mr. Moderator, the difference here is that under both the special act that we're operating under, Chapter 272 of the Acts of 1989, and under Section 42 of Chapter 48, the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority for the police chief and the fire chief. And it's my intention and suggestion in terms of policy that those two positions should be appointed by somebody, by a board that's elected directly by the people, and not to have those two positions in the hands of someone who is, in the end, an appointed authority, that is the town administrator. So that is my motion to amend, Mr. Chairman, and apparently it's not a friendly amendment, and I urge a yes vote in inserting the amendment in the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I don't know if Chief Larson wants to add anything.
Mr. Larson, you're recognized. Then I'm going to explain where we are and procedurally.
Right. As I mentioned, Chapter 48, Section 42 is the establishment, appointment of the fire chief, and it also covers compensation, removal, powers, and duties. And in this section, it does say the chief shall be appointed by the selectmen and shall receive such salary as the selectmen may from time to time determine, not exceeding in the aggregate the amount annually appropriated, and he may be removed for cause by the selectmen at any time after a hearing. So there are several references in this Mass General Law referring to the Board of Selectmen having this authority, and I feel that it is important to keep this intact and to keep this authority where it is explained in the Mass General Law.
So Mr. Larson, you're supportive of the last changes that Mr. McGettrick just made to your motion to amend. Is that correct?
Yes, I am, in which would, in fact, I don't even know if you could change a Mass General Law by this article. I mean, there would be a conflict here.
Okay. So I just want to know if you're supportive. Are there any other comments on the motion amendment? Because I want to explain to the body where we are. It gets a little confusing fast.
Yes.
Okay. So, folks, Mr. McGettrick has made a motion to amend. Look on page 46 under Section 2. The second paragraph down begins with the word notwithstanding and ends with the word following with a colon. He wants to replace that with, and I'm going to read this to you, and the clerk, I will deliver this to you after we vote. In the appointment of the fire chief, the Board of Selectmen shall continue to comply with Section 42 of Chapter 48 of the general laws. In the appointment of the police chief, the Board of Selectmen shall continue to comply with Chapter 272 of the Acts of 1989. Otherwise, notwithstanding any provision of the general or special law to the contrary, the powers and duties of the town administrator shall include, but not be limited to, the following. Now, Mr. Neely, is it your board's intention to accept this as a friendly amendment, yes or no?
Mr. Moderator, the committee is no. The committee, we're good friends, but good friends disagree, and the committee is not in agreement, and the committee believes that the provisions of the article that provide for the Board of Selectmen to veto the appointment, any appointment of department head, covers the situations where there was a disagreement or there was an unwise choice by the town administrator. We believe it's in the interest of the town administrator for their own job security to run a very careful, sensitive screening process, and that we believe the authority should be vested in the town administrator.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hurley, it's my opinion that since both the Board of Selectmen and the Town Government Study Committee have submitted this, that if one is not accepting as a friendly amendment, it's not going to be accepted as a friendly amendment. Did you want to speak to that? Yes, please. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Hurley, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen also does not support the amendment, the motion to amend. While we do support the selection process, what we disagree with is the appointment authority. What we're trying to do here is create basically a chief executive officer of the town, and we think it's important, and clearly that the police chief and the fire chief are key members of the management team, and as such, we think that the chief executive officer or the town administrator should have the appointing authority ultimately over those people, so that it is a cohesive team.
Thank you. Okay, so now Mr. McGetrick has made a motion to amend. That needs to be seconded. Second. It's seconded. Now, in front of you is now just the motion to amend. Does anyone wish to speak to that motion? Mr. Larson, you're recognized.
Malcolm Larson, Precinct 1. Well, I would have one question, maybe for Mr. Flynn, is if this motion to amend does not pass, where do we stand with Chapter 48, Section 42, Mass General Law, that clearly states that the selectmen make the decision?
Mr. Flynn, you're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, to be technical, I think the question is, what if town meeting votes this article without the amendment that's before you now? The answer is that the first part of Section 1 says, notwithstanding the provision of any general or special law to the contrary. What you're being asked to do here is to petition the general court to basically change the form of government in the town of Milton. And if the end result of this debate is that Article 15 is voted as proposed, or at least without the amendment that's pending now, the town administrator would be the appointing authority. The two statutes that are referenced in the pending motion would be superseded by, I'm sorry, I should back up. If town meeting votes this article without the amendment that's pending before you now, and if the general court, the legislature, enacts a statute in that form, the two statutes that are referenced in the motion would be superseded. Those two statutes say that your Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority for the police chief and the fire chief. If this becomes law, this would be a special act that would supersede those two statutes. So the appointing authority for your fire chief and your police chief would now be the town administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion to amend? Sorry. Mrs. Sheridan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Linda Lee Sheridan, Precinct 9. I think that my question now, the way legal counsel has just explained, it pertains to this. So I'm referencing section 1 on page 45. Third line down where it says, or the previous to that it says, notwithstanding any provision of any general or special law to the contrary, the Board of Selectmen shall appoint a town administrator to serve for a definite term of not more than 3 years. So my question is around that line right there, a definite term of not more than 3 years. It doesn't say if that person can be, if that contract, that 3-year contract can be renewed, or if that is just a 1 3-year
Okay.
term.
I'm going to hold you right there. So, fair question when we're debating the entire recommendation. We are now focusing our comments only on, unless you're saying it pertains to the motion to amend.
I now think it may, because
I see.
if we're saying that it's just if the Board of Selectmen doesn't have any say in it, then this person, I don't know. I'm thinking it might. Maybe someone can help me. Separate issue? Okay. I'll wait.
It's okay. Mr. Hiss, do you wish to speak to the motion to amend? Are you, Mrs. Sheridan, are you satisfied, or do you have a question?
Not trying to jump.
Okay. Mr. Hiss, you're recognized.
Sure, Bob Hiss, Precinct 3, a member of the Town Government Study Committee. Maybe we kind of jumped into this perhaps without a macro picture, which I wanted to try to share for a minute. So my issue with the reason I'm supporting this and the problems I have with the way we're currently structured is that we've got this Board of Selectmen that's neither fish nor fowl. They're really not a board in the executive sense, and they're not a hands-on chief executive in the sense you'd think of if you thought of a CEO. And just as some more background on the committee that we serve on is pretty varied interest. Like I serve with Phil Matthews. Phil and I probably don't agree politically on anything in the world, right? But we agree on this because this is, in my mind, a non-political thing. This is a structure and an org design issue, and I want to try to fix what I think is a structural problem we have. So if you saw effective board running, you'd see things like long-range strategy, 5-year plans, a 5-year operating budget, a 5-year capital budget. You'd have a context for making decisions within the town. And if you saw an effective chief executive function operating, you'd see they were hiring their direct reports. Those direct reports would hire the people below them. They would be able to operate within the context of that strategy and that position. They'd be able to assemble the town-wide budget. And instead of that town-wide budget coming and hitting the citizen soldiers of the warrant committee kind of cold, and them not having any context for figuring out, well, should we invest in parks or should we invest in affordable housing? Should we invest in roads? I don't know. Let's make it up as we go every year, or try to use the institutional memory of these volunteers to figure that out. But an effective chief executive would figure that out. So that's the background about why we're trying to create this. If you saw this thing working, you should be able to go to our website or the town annual report, and you can do that for towns all over the Commonwealth, and you can find what are the strategic goals of the town. The selectmen put them there because they're a policy-making organization. Or you could go find what is the 5-year operating budget. So you could see, are we setting aside money for all the things you want on a long-term basis, and then the warrant committee then go make decisions in that context. But we don't have any of that stuff. So that's evidence to me that this is not set up the right way. So what I would really like to see is a way for us to have a single individual that can hire their team, then manage their team, and be held accountable by the Board of Selectmen, who we all elect. And if they disagree with the function of that town administrator, then they go replace the town administrator. And if you're unhappy that they're not doing, then you go replace the selectmen. So you've got all these circuit breakers to go help you as citizens and as town meeting members execute your authority and control. If you also think about for a minute, imagine how balkanized we are. I mean, we think of the selectmen as running the town, but you look at the budget, they don't run the schools, that's half the budget. They don't run the library. I mean, there's a separate cemetery trustees, there's separate parks commissioners. We've got this separate treasurer function for the cash. It's highly balkanized. So if we accept this amendment, what we're saying is, selectmen, pick the fire chief and the police chief, balkanize it some more, then have them report to the town administrator, and the town administrator didn't go make the recommendation, didn't go actually pick the people. So it creates more structural problems that we're just trying to organize and clean up. So that's why I think accepting this amendment starts to break apart the fabric of what we are trying to do And the idea that you put the chief executive, the town administrator in charge, hold them accountable. If you don't like them, fire them. If you don't like the selectman, replace the selectman until you get a new one. That's the essence of what we're trying to do and pull this together. So that's why I'm opposed to the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion to amend? Yes. Our former fire chief. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Don Alfanello, Precinct 6. I believe this town meeting body back in 1928 accepted this Mass General Law that we're talking about. And as far as I know, and I can personally attest to it, it seemed to have worked pretty well since back then. So I move we accept this amendment.
Okay. Mr. Larson, do you wish to speak again? Is there, before you say anything, is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this motion? Mr. Larson, you're recognized.
Well, this will be my final comment. During my 11 years as fire chief, I worked under 4 different town administrators, which I believe is a town record. 2 of them were about as Milton as you can get, John Cronin and Kevin Murn, and the other 2 were out-of-towners. And I do support this article, but with 2 exceptions. And these 2 exceptions are the appointment of the fire chief and the appointment of the police chief. And I think that these Mass General laws that have been established and these policies that have been established are very solid and well accepted, as Chief Afanato has said. And I just think it would be a mistake to revoke and take Milton out of these Mass General laws.
Okay. All right. Before I recognize Mr. Mullen, I'm going to ask this question again. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion to amend? If you do, I want you to step forward now. Otherwise, after Mr. Mullen speaks, we're moving to a vote. Mr. Mullen, you're recognized.
Peter Mullen, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2, and member of the Town Government Study Committee. I think it's important that the town meeting be aware as to what the essence is of this article and this proposed amendment. The question really is who's going to appoint the police chief and the fire chief. That's really the issue. The strong fire chief statute, we've adopted that statute. We're not revoking that adoption of the statute. The powers of the fire chief are going to remain the same. With regard to the bylaw that governs the appointment of the police chief, we have a bylaw right now that says the Board of Selectmen appoints the police chief. And we'll probably have to amend that to make it clear that it's the administrator afterwards, but that's the purpose of this article. Right now, in the Town Government Study Committee, we discussed the question of whether we should exempt the police chief and the fire chief from the scope of this article. And we just came to the conclusion that how do you distinguish those 2 positions from, say, the Director of Public Works? That's a big department. It's an important position. Nothing was more important in the town this past winter than the Director of Public Works. The idea behind this article is that the town of Milton is a $100 million a year operation, and it needs to have a chief executive, a board of 3 volunteers. And I couldn't help but noticing tonight when we're going through the article on general government, we pay the chairman of the Board of Selectmen $1,800 a year and the 2 other members $1,500. We can't ask them to run a $100 million a year operation. We hire a town administrator to manage the town, to manage many of the employees. Right now, the Board of Selectmen appoints every town employee that falls under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. the purpose of this article is solely to change that appointment process. I understand the argument that Mr. McGetrick has made that you want politically responsible people responsible for these appointments. And that's provided for in this article. Because although we give the town administrator the authority to appoint the police chief and the fire chief and all other department heads and all other employees within the scope of the Board of Selectmen, it specifically provides that if the Board of Selectmen is unhappy with that appointment, within 15 days of getting notice of that appointment, the Board of Selectmen can override the administrator and reject the appointment. This article doesn't change, doesn't address at all the process that Chief Larson was talking about with regard to how the last two fire chiefs have been appointed, how they've been, the process that's been gone through. That process could be gone through again. In those two times when that happened, it was because of either, it was the then current Board of Selectmen that adopted that process. It's not in any bylaw, it's not in any statute, none of that will be changed. Therefore, I would urge a no vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we are now going to wait for the Warrant Committee's position on the motion to amend. While we do, I want to explain, just so there would be no... Oh, I'm sorry. All right, Mr. Hurley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll be very brief. And by the way, I'm worth every bit of that $1,800. But I just want to reiterate that in terms of we do support the process, and clearly we can't amend the process right now until we know that the home rule petition is passed, because it wouldn't make any sense at that point. But we do support, certainly, if it does pass, coming back at the next town meeting and amending the process so that it would be the town administrator appointing with the, the committee procedure in place.
A few moments ago, Mr. Larson was indicating he wanted to speak, and I had him wait. And the reason I had him wait was we have a new rule. This is, I think, the second year of the meeting, where your moderator is supposed to only recognize a person for the second time while no other person is waiting to speak, and then a third time only by permission of the moderator. And I just want to make sure we didn't have people lined up. It was at least the third time, which I was happy to recognize them for, but I just want to explain all the things that are trying to go on here to keep this meeting moving. We are now only waiting for the vote, which I can see is on the home stretch. It's a position of the Warrant Committee and the motion to amend. Then we will take that vote. And that will require a majority to pass. Mr. Hayes, you're recognized.
Thank you. The Warrant Committee does not support the amendment as proposed. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion to amend say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The motion to amend is defeated. It's my opinion at 11:15 that we... Yes.
I'm standing, or have several others stand for a standing vote.
And I don't see 7 standing. Thank you. At this hour, at 11:15, we're not going... It's my opinion that we're going to have more dialogue than we can take on tonight on this motion. When we reconvene tomorrow night, we're back to the main motion. I would suggest if you have time between tonight and tomorrow night and you haven't had a chance to really look at this recommendation, spend that time. I'd like to entertain a motion to amend at this point. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.